maybe here we are. Perfect. All right. Welcome everyone to the Flux meeting. Today is Thursday, the 13th of August. And we have a little bit of an agenda. If you have any more items, please add them to the agenda now. Just briefly scanning through the notes from last time to check if there were any open work items. It looks like not, so we're good. Sweet. Yeah, we have some big news. For those of you who've been following these meetings and the mailing list, you know that we've been, actually, I think it should be Stefan or Michael who we talk about this.
You mean the blog post?
Yes.
Yeah, so I mean, it is funny for anyone that's come along to these meetings. So we've announced Flux version 2 and the GitOps toolkit, which means that we can finally talk in these meetings about those things. I'm joking. Obviously, we've been doing that for a while, but it's more public than it was. Put it that way.
It seemed that video with the what was it, the Norwegian group you guys talked to, that was on YouTube, so that was out there quite a couple months ago, right?
That was a teaser.
Yeah. Teaser. Okay.
Our media
that was planned.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's all planned.
Right,
yeah.
good.
Basically, the idea was to present like the experiments that the team had been working on, and now in the past weeks, we get more input from the entire community and from a lot of different people just to figure out if these plans make actual sense. And now I think it's clearer what the roadmap is and what this is going to mean for Flux V1 users in the future. So we're going to attract a number of contributors now, get feedback, and make adjustments where we need them.
One question I'm going to have for Azure, Microsoft Azure Arc Kubernetes is we're trying to release GA for that by the end of the year here, but we wouldn't have time to move to Flux V2, and plus it wouldn't be ready. So we're going to release with Flux V1 support. And my question is going to be, what do you think it'll look like to transition very quickly the next year to Flux V2? Typically in Azure, if we have a feature, we have to support it for at least a year. So it's possible we may have to, take your last drop of Flux V2 and support our V1, support that for a year, as we also enable Flux V2 within our product. Any thoughts on what Flux V1 to Flux V2 might look like?
Hey, Chris, I have a question. My understanding is that Azure Arc uses Flux in read-only mode. Is that true?
Currently, that is true, but we would enable write if customers asked for it.
Because going from Flux V1 read-only mode to V2, that read-only mode does the same thing over the GitOps toolkit, could be achieved with no impact to the user, unless they use image updates, or if they use the Flux YAML configuration.
Okay. That's a good thing to know then. So if we just kept it at read-only, then it would be an easier transition.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great.
It would be a smooth transition.
We can do like more kind of detailed coordination, Chris, to kind of make sure that you're not going to add stuff or rely on something that's getting deprecated or something like that. We've got a lot of the detail in the roadmap and stuff, but we're bound to have missed things that don't seem top headlines to us that might be quite crucial for you. So we're very happy to go over stuff in detail.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, we also have some outstanding issues with Flux V2 and the toolkit in regards to Git providers. The only Git provider that we currently don't support is Azure DevOps. And the reason for that is we moved from the model where in Flux V1, Flux will shell exec to all sorts of binaries like Git, PGP, SSH daemon, and so on. And that model means you have to run Flux as root in the container. You have to configure it by mounting all sorts of volumes. So an end user, if they want to change something, they have to create some secrets, then change the mount, and it's quite a complicated thing if you're not into Flux a lot. In version 2, what we did was instead of users having to redeploy Flux and configure volumes and all this stuff for any kind of change, in V2, you just deploy Flux. It will sit there and do nothing. Then it waits for you to tell it through the Kubernetes API with a custom resource, hey, here is your Git repo, here is the authentication, here is the PGP key, and so on. And it will dynamically configure itself with no restarts and so on. For us to build this kind of feature, we had to drop execing to Git itself, and we used the Go Git library, which is one of the most used libraries out there. I think it's the most up-to-date, and it works really great. It powers a lot of open source projects. The problem there is that my understanding is that Azure DevOps doesn't implement Git protocol version 1, and that is what Go Git uses. Azure only works for protocol version 2. That's my understanding of it.
Okay, so we need to talk to the EDO folks.
Yeah, there is an issue open on the Go Git repository. I can give it to you afterwards, and we could discuss how to make this happen for Azure DevOps. One option will be forking the project into the Flux CD Foundation, work together on it to add or version 2 support, or make something that the DevOps product works, then try to contribute that to the Go Git upstream repository. And while we are doing that, we could use our own fork in Flux V2 and get it on. But I don't know what it means to make it work.
Okay, so if you could send me sort of an email on that, Stefan, and with as much details as you have. And another team I'm talking to here, and I invited them to this, but they didn't show up today, and that's the GitHub people. Many of the DevOps team transitioned to GitHub team, and they're the ones I work with are located in India, but they have resources and they might be interested in helping with something like this as well. So if you send me an email, I'll loop them in and we can start talking about what that would look like.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, for GitHub it works. It's not a problem. GitLab, Bitbucket, any kind of Git server, because I don't know, besides DevOps, the DevOps project, everybody implemented the V1 protocol. I don't know.
And DevOps implemented V2?
Yeah, I don't know.
I see.
Why who took that decision? But it's a it's a roadblocker for sure. Adopting Flux V2, so we should make a plan for it and.
Yep. Okay. Do you have my email? Can you? I can.
No, I have it.
Yeah, Daniel has it too. All right. Yeah, I think those are my main questions for today.
What we are working on, and I think we are very close now, is integrating with GitHub commit status API. We have a working pull request contributed by someone. The idea behind it is when you deal with many Git repos that are, all of them are composing your cluster state, is kind of hard to reach back to the person that actually made a change and make that person aware, hey, whatever you change in a YAML or in a Helm chart or whatever is not working. It got rejected by the cluster, or there is some kind of failure. And what we managed to achieve is having a way through alert custom resource where you can say, hey, for this particular reconciler, I want you to write back to this repository the final status of the reconciliation. So let's say you do a commit, that commit eventually gets on the cluster, it fails, then the GitOps toolkit, the Flux V2 will write back on that particular commit and will tell you, hey, this thing failed. And for that reason, and we can have a couple of reasons. It can be a validation failure. It can be an apply failure. I don't know, or URL failure. We have a couple of types of failure. So we give you a hint and we try to reach back to that particular person that made the change that broke something. And of course, we also report on success, and we also report on, if you have health checks, we also report on health checks. So maybe your change is not a problem in the YAML. Maybe the YAML is perfect when you did that that commit. It gets on the repo, it gets applied on the cluster successfully. Then the maybe that change triggered a redeployment, a deployment rollout, and that deployment failed. Let's say it's stuck for some reason. Then we will write back to the commit status that that deployment failed. So it gives you yet another, let's say, instant feedback to the person that made that change. The change is okay, it passes validation, but your workload is down. So that are things that we do it for GitHub, and we will try to expand in the future this thing to other platforms. I don't know. GitLab for sure has something like that. Bitbucket as well has an API that allows you to do that, and I don't know if Azure DevOps does it, but I guess it does.
Is it going to be possible through the webhook, the outbound webhook, to attach to this event as well, or not? Using the webhook capability to actually be more generic about sending this sort of deployment failure information.
You mean like trigger some arbitrary thing that's part of
like writing back to Azure somewhere, some random event queue or something.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that's part of the motivation, or at least part of the kind of bonus for doing things in building things with GitOps toolkit rather than monolithically with Flux, is that it's a lot easier to have integration points like that, because it's just sort of one small moving part, rather than buried in a larger thing. So that's definitely the intention, is that there's integration points with outgoing, incoming webhooks.
That's one thing I was just wondering about is, if someone was going to build a general system for aggregating, events like this, reports from many different clusters, how would they scrape, say in GitHub, how would they scrape the commit status messages into a central, or some sort of reporting structure or interface?
Yeah, I'm thinking, instead of scraping the status, the commit status,
right,
you could configure the toolkit to say, hey, for any kind of event that happens on the cluster and is related to a particular, I don't know, application or the whole cluster itself, I want any kind of event type error on the cluster to be redirected to this HTTPS endpoint. And what we are sending to that endpoint is a structure, a JSON object that looks like a Kubernetes event. It has all the properties of a Kubernetes event. So you know the involved Kubernetes object, the ID of the object, the name, the namespace, the actual error. We attach the actual error of what happened. If a deployment failed, we'll tell you, okay, the deployment failed because it timed out on the rollout and so on. Or if the validation failed, we will tell you what part of your whole YAML is wrong. Like you mistype cluster IP and it's cluster IPs, and you'll get that error in the message. And we have a generic webhook facility where you can just send all these JSONs to your dedicated endpoint. And from there, you have all the information and you can take action. You can build an aggregation all over it, or React, do a rollback on your own, or build whatever other things you may need.
Okay. Is there info in there about the commit, so you can correlate the deployment with which commit it was associated with, or?
Yes. For example, the customized controller, when it tells you, hey, the validation failed, or the deployment failed, and all these type of failures or success messages, they have a metadata attached, which is the name of the branch and the commit, or the git tag and the commit. So this is why we managed to integrate with GitHub and write to the commit status, because we have that information in the event itself.
Okay, cool.
Chris, are you thinking of kind of large-scale systems where you might want to point all the tenants at one thing and have a sort of ingestion, point them at a Kafka or whatever it is, stick them in a database or something?
Well, at the very minimum, I know the GitHub folks are very interested in getting the GitOps deployment information back into GitHub for the customer. Because basically with GitOps, the customer has pretty good control over the CI part of the CI/CD, but then the CD becomes a little bit mysterious. And so just try to get some of that information. If the customer is working totally in GitHub, and the GitHub team is dedicated to making GitHub totally open, it's not going to look like Microsoft. It's going to be totally open. So people from anywhere using any system and if they're using GitOps, they may want to get the information back into GitHub. And on the other side, in Azure, for Azure Arc, we also want to be able to provide that information back to Azure, because again, right now it's a mystery. Once you've deployed to your Git repo, it's a mystery exactly what happened on the clusters. So we want to get some information back into Azure for customers, and what that's going to look like, we don't know yet. But Azure has alerting systems and things like that. So I can imagine customers would eventually want to be able to hook up to the Azure alerting system, and that's the kind of thing.
You have kind of three main areas of observability.
Yeah.
I trapped myself into saying that word, but anyway, so you have the things like metrics. So exported Prometheus metrics, which GitOps Toolkit is pretty good at now, I think, where you can say, this hasn't succeeded for 10 minutes or something along those lines. Then there's the custom resources themselves. You can look at and see, this one's been synced, great. So you can just scan stuff in the cluster to see what's going on. And then the other one is events as they happen. So this thing succeeded or failed or whatever, right? So, and you sort of need all three of them in a way, don't you?
Yes.
Because you can't really build a full picture just out of the events, and you certainly can't out of the metrics. And the things themselves aren't historical. They don't have historical information or time.
I think the event is enough, because we serialize in event the whole custom resource. In Kubernetes is called involved object. So you have the definition of your customization, right? This customization is synchronizing this particular Git repository with these settings, and it failed in this way with this error message at this commit in that branch.
Sure.
So,
Yeah. You know then and there, but you don't know, for instance, and it's been failing,
right.
for 10 minutes, and the last
Right.
50
That's
minutes or something.
that's
Yeah.
in metrics. That's in metrics. You can see a plot of a graph of, okay, it's failing in the last 30 minutes or whatever. But as I don't know, to create, let's say, an incident in some incident management system, the event has enough information for you to create, for example, to open an incident in PagerDuty, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And when another event comes with the same involved object, and the status is not error, it's success, then you can close automatically the incident in PagerDuty. It's something that Alert Manager does on its own when it opens an incident when errors are starting, but if they are recovering themselves, then it knows how to go there and close it.
Yep.
In the same way, I think someone could build a receiver for the GitOps toolkit events, and being able to automate this kind of, I'm opening an incident, if it resolves itself, then I can close it. The PagerDuty sort of things, like, they are really nice. I've been using PagerDuty in the past, and I was amazed by how well it can work based on just events and things that you can observe inside your system.
Yeah, I think, and things like the incident management systems, we really keep that pretty much open for the customer, whatever they like to use, and so just being able to get it into the Azure Alert system is the main thing, and from there the customers can use Azure Alert to open incidents in their own systems.
Nice.
So yeah.
On the Azure side, another question I have, because now Michael is working on the image update feature, and is AKS, right, connected directly to the Azure registry through an IAM role or something like that? How does that work? I don't
So
think
AKS.
Yes. So if you want to pull an image from a container registry, how is Arc doing that?
So Arc just it just so like the Arc agents, you mean? That when we install Arc on a machine?
When you provision an AKS cluster, do you also, I'm guessing, you provision access to a specific container registry? How is it called in Azure?
I think it's
So
ACR.
ACR, right?
So they have the Microsoft Container Registry and the ACR. I see that we call it MCR. Microsoft Container Registry is the one that's used for like internal agents. It's more of the Microsoft registry that we use. But then ACR is Azure Container Registry is more for private registries that customers build for themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So as far as I know, there's this sort of ambient authority, like your machines have credentials on the host are provisioned that way so that they can pull stuff from ACR. But that is only a vague memory from trying to build the scanning stuff in Flux.
Yeah, I'm actually not sure how that works. I know that on our the Arc clusters, we're moving to using a managed service identity, Azure MSI, for access to the ARM resources within Azure, and that same MSI may be also used for access to the MCR. I'm not sure. I'll have to ask our engineers how that works.
Yeah, we could definitely use some guidance on
Okay.
building the ACR integration, because
blind last time a bit. It'd be nice to have a nice smooth.
Again, send an email and I'll find the right people to help out with that.
That'd be super helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, we got into some issues where the ACR cert or whatever it was, it expires, and Flux is not aware that it expires, so it cannot pull, and at some point, if you restart it, it works. If you move it to another node, it doesn't work. So we definitely miss some details in there that we are not aware of because we don't use it on a daily basis. So it's
Okay.
hard
Was
to understand what's going
Yeah.
on.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that was that using service principal, or do you know? Because the service principals do expire. That's why one of the reasons they created the managed service identities, which are automatically managed, so you don't have to worry about expiration there.
We
Use
ended up
MSIs.
doing so in Flux v1 that it's kind of a bodge. Basically, you can, because in some circumstances, Azure will put a Docker config with authentication on the host. For image pull, we just let people kind of say, mount that, and then refer to it from Flux, and we will use those credentials. I think that's as sophisticated as it got. I may be wrong. And at the time, and this is 2 years ago or something, at the time, it wasn't a better way of doing it. So it sounds like there's at least 2 better ways of doing it now.
Yeah, MSIs are fairly recent, so I bet that's the better way now.
Cool.
One other thing that when we start working on it is, we've talked to you about how to use certificate authentication when through Flux and through Flux Helm to the repo. And so as we start getting into details of that, we might have some questions for you. I know that you sent some pointers to someone had opened some issues on GitHub for you guys on that, but we're going to be digging into details on how to actually make that work.
Yeah,
sounds like you. Yeah.
That's another topic we should get it on Toolkit as well. Using a custom certificate that's not recognized by the Alpine image in which our process runs.
Yeah.
It's a hard thing to accomplish without going there and mounting things and dealing with rootfs, modifying rootfs and so on. We want to find a way that you say, hey, I have a secret. In that secret is my custom cert. Please trust it. Doesn't matter if the OS doesn't. I want you to trust it. And a secret should be enough, a reference to the existing Kubernetes secret without having to create mounts and all these things. We definitely want to sort this out in version 2 and not do it with volumes. Right now in Flux version 1 there are 2 things. One, you can use an init container when you start Flux. Write the certificate on the rootfs, because the init container runs as root, Flux runs as root, so they have access to the same file system inside the pod. So you can write there the certificate, then tell Flux, hey, mount the certificate from that that path. And probably have to do a git something command that adds that certificate to the git store.
Yeah. Okay.
And it should work with init containers, but what that means is you have to custom make the Flux deployment for each Arc user specifically for that user, because they have their own init container, they have their own things. What we want to do in the toolkit, instead of customers having to modify the deployment itself, they will just create a custom resource on the server and say, hey, I have a custom certificate, there it is. And the tooling should pick it up. If they delete it, that's it, you lose authentication, but don't have to modify the original deployment that's managed by the provider in a way. I mean, Azure comes with this version of Flux and everybody should use it, right? You start to modify that thing, then it's hard to manage.
Right. Okay, that'll be great for V2. Anyway, as we try to get this going for V1, we might have our engineer reach back to you if there's any issues with it and get your advice.
Michael, I'm going the right direction with volumes. This is how you could do it today, right?
Yeah, I think so. So typically, if you want to trust a new CA, then you have to do a little bit of preparation. Because it sort of off the top of my head / from memory. So you can't just drop a file in. It has to be at least a process which goes through and like aggregates all the CAs and sticks them in one place, because the whatever's consuming them tends to do it that way. It's like they're all in one file, and I think it's just all of them catted together. But so yeah, you can't just mount a new CA in. Usually, you could do it through an init container in a shared directory, and then when Flux kicks off, you mount it into Etsy, or yeah, it's non-trivial certainly. But none of the stuff really works for GitOps Toolkit or Flux v2 because it's multiplexed. So you can't mount something that's only for one tenant into the controller file system. You would have to do that for all the tenants, and that just doesn't make any sense. So
yeah,
you have to do something.
Yeah, like we do today with in the toolkit with PGP keys, where each tenant can have its own keys, of course, and say, hey, for this tenant, for this repository, use these keys, and these keys are in this Kubernetes secret. The same way should be, hey, for this repository, please use this TLS secret, and that's where you get the certificate. So you can have any number of repositories with any number of tenants, each with its own cert. But we just need to figure out how to do this with the GoGit package, how to mount the.
Yeah, I mean that was one of the requests from the customers. We asked them, and they want to be able to use a separate certificate for each repo. So each instance of Flux could have its own. It need to have its own configuration for that.
Yeah.
So we were hoping it might just be cluster wide, but it's not. It's individual. So
if it's just for Git, then it might be possible to just tell Git where's the CA cert. I can't remember off the top of my head, but
yeah, in this case, these folks are using Bitbucket, so it's a.
It's a on-prem
Bitbucket, yeah.
The Bitbucket server.
Bitbucket
exactly.
Server. Used to be Stash, I think. Is that right? Yeah. Yeah. So, Chris, our plan with Flux v1 support at present, anyway, is that once we reach parity, like full parity of Flux v2 can do everything Flux v1 can do, minus the things we're deliberately deprecating, then we want to try and have like a 6-month window for moving users of Flux v1 to v2, right? So
yeah,
that's obviously, if you've got a 1-year support thing, that's obviously not going to be enough for you. So we'll have to figure out basically how we can make it so that your Flux v1 is still supportable by you, but by us, by you.
Yeah, I mean, what Stefan said was very interesting, that if we keep it read-only, that we might be able to just transition people through automatically updating their deployments.
That'd be ideal.
But I think even then we have to worry about folks who I'm not sure if they can turn off our automatic update or not, but there's always ones out there who don't want you to change their deployment, and so you have to support them for a year. But we'll see. I'm going to take this and look into it and see what we can do with this, make it easier.
Yeah, what's sensible about Flux going forward is the fact that Kubernetes moves fast, right? They do a new release and they deprecate some API. Like the best example is you couldn't have deployments under the v1 beta 2 version inside your Git if you are if your cluster is Kubernetes 1.16, it will not know how to create a deployment out of that. So after you upgrade the cluster, if you don't upgrade what's in Git and you don't upgrade the thing that synchronizes Git with the cluster, that's Flux. If not all of those are aware of the same APIs and have the same version, then it blows up. So what we have to do every time, what we are doing right now in Flux V1, and we'll be doing the same thing in the toolkit, we are always upgrading one version lower than the latest stable. So now the latest stable is 1.18. In Flux, we have 1.17, kubectl, Go client, everything. So because we can support 1.16, 1.17, 1.18. This is how kubectl works. This is how the release cadence in Kubernetes works. And we have to follow that in order to support all our users. Now, what we are saying is the moment we have feature parity, we said we are going to keep updating Flux for CVEs, Kubernetes versions, and so on for 6 months. But if we have a situation, and it looks like we do, we'll have to support more than 6 months of upgrading kubectl and client Go and the API. So Flux will be able to synchronize, I don't know, Kubernetes 1.24 or whatever it will be by next year. Because there are many chances that Flux, the current version that is today, will not be able to work with Kubernetes 1 month away from now.
I see.
It's very close.
Lovely. Okay.
Another example is the ingress definition. So the ingress definition will go away this year. Ingress V1 beta 1 will not work anymore. So if that doesn't work, like
okay. Alrighty. Well, we'll stay in close contact with you guys.
Is there more business? Any other business? Daniel?
Yeah, two small admin things. One of them is we have the annual review of the CNCF sandbox that is due for Tuesday next week. Michael and I are working on a PR for that. Yeah, it's largely no big deal. The CNCF just wants to know what's happening, so we'll take care of that. The other thing I wanted to look into, now that we've also announced like the support time frame and what's going to happen, I think at some stage it's going to make sense to have a look at the open feature requests for Flux and then inform people like this is what's happening. If you want to bring this to Flux V2, like go here with a short explanation, like, you know, these are the different controllers, like they're going to need some background information. And I think it's going to be interesting to see if we get people who are willing to help us out with this.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it's going to depend on the individual.
Sure.
There are some, I mean, there are definitely some PRs that are still open that never quite got there, where the person's going to have a bit of a sense of, you know, a reasonable sense of being a little aggrieved, you know, it never got read.
Sure.
But that's okay. I mean, that's open source. It doesn't always work out.
Yeah. I mean, that would be PRs, but I think for like issues that are actually feature requests, I think it should be a lot easier.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's a good story there, isn't there? It's like, I'm sorry, we can't, you know, it's just too hard to do this for Flux V1, but hey.
Yeah. I feel like the GitHub discussions have really helped shaping the discussion somewhat. So I would hope that sort of makes it easier to have a bit of a debate, like where is this going, and then find a proper issue for it.
Yep.
We can definitely close a bunch of issues regarding logging, because now we have finally delivered structured logging. JSON works out of the box with, I don't know, Elasticsearch, Kibana, whatever you are using to crawl your logs.
Such a nightmare from a backward compatibility point of view. You just, once you've said it, you can't change it.
Yeah. Also around metrics, now we have coherent metrics around everything. So yeah, we should hunt down all those issues and point people to, hey, we didn't manage to solve it here, but version 2 already has it. Go and look at it, especially with the logs. It's very easy to say, alert me on any error, because it's obvious what the error is in the logs now.
Maybe we should have a kind of working bee where we, working bee is when you get a bunch of people to sort of come along on a particular day and to do, make a playground or something. We could have a working bee for dealing with all the old PRs and issues, and once we get to that point.
Yeah, I'd be happy to draft like a little text so we can inform people on those issues.
Yeah, you mean like just some pro forma?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. All right.
Carlo, would you want to say something?
I'm just listening in for now. Interesting discussion, but hopefully I'll be able to contribute soon.
Cool.
Thank you.
Carlos, he's one of the engineers on our team who's going to be helping out with this. We also have, I forgot to invite him. We also have a new engineer who is going to be hooking up for the private repo and the certificate work. And I need to invite him to this as well. I'll loop you guys in with him.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Super. All right. Anything else? In that
KubeCon
case,
next week.
yes.
Yeah.
All right. Have a great day, everyone.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.